At the third row by the window sat David, a boy whose appearance was hard to ignore. His uniform was spotless, his tie perfectly knotted, and his hair neatly trimmed. But it wasn't just his neatness that stood out. David's skin had a smooth, radiant glow, his lips were naturally pink, and his lashes were so long and dark that they looked as if they had been drawn on. His striking features often drew comments from students, and even some teachers. Explained the use of figurative expressions, she suddenly stopped mid-sentence and turned to David. Her eyes narrowed as she scrutinized his face. "David," she said sharply, causing the other students to turn and look at him. "Yes, ma?" David replied, his voice calm and respectful. Mrs. Daniels folded her arms. "Why are you wearing makeup to my class? Me, young man, stand up and leave my class immediately. Go and wash your face before you come back." David's face fell, but he stood up obediently. He didn't want to cause trouble. As he walked out of the classroom, whispers erupted among the students. Some felt sorry for him, while others found the situation amusing. Outside the classroom, David leaned against the wall, feeling embarrassed. He didn't understand why people couldn't accept that his looks were natural. He had dealt with similar accusations before, but it always stung. He sighed deeply, trying to focus on the breeze brushing against his face. Inside the classroom, Mrs. Daniels continued her lesson. One of the girls, Anita, whispered to her friend, "David is too fine for his own good. I think that's why Mrs. Daniels is mad." As the bell rang for the next period, David returned to the classroom. His face was clean, but he still looked just as radiant. Mrs. Daniels gave him a stern look, but said nothing as he quietly took his seat. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, but David couldn't shake off the embarrassment he had felt earlier. When school ended, David walked home with his best friend, Peter. Peter was a cheerful and loyal boy who never failed to stand by David's side. As they walked, Peter tried to lighten the mood. "Don't mind Mrs. Daniels, David. She's just jealous because you're finer than her." David laughed despite himself. "You're not serious, Peter, but it's not just her. People are always making comments about how I look. Sometimes I wish I looked ordinary." "Ordinary? No way," Peter exclaimed. "Do you know how many people wish they looked like you? You should be proud of yourself, David. Forget the haters." David smiled. Peter always knew how to make him feel better. But deep down, David wondered if his appearance would always make him a target for attention, good or bad. The sun hung high in the sky that afternoon, casting a golden glow over Jira High School. David sat under a tree near the school's sports field, his head resting on his knees. It was another day of being sent out of the classroom for reasons he still couldn't fully understand. His friend Peter, ever loyal and concerned, approached him with his usual bright demeanor. "David, what's going on again? Why do they keep sending you out of class?" Peter asked, sitting beside him. David shrugged, his expression clouded with frustration. "I don't know, Peter. I honestly don't. Mrs. Daniels says it's because I'm distracting, but I don't do anything to distract anyone. I just sit there and listen." Peter furrowed his brow, thinking for a moment before replying. "This doesn't make any sense. If you're not doing anything wrong, then it's not fair. Have you talked to anyone about this? Maybe you should tell our class teacher. She's usually nice and might understand." David looked at Peter doubtfully. "Do you think she'll listen? What if she just tells me the same thing as the others?" "It's worth a shot," Peter said, standing up and pulling David to his feet. "Come on, let's go to the staff office. You can explain everything to her. Maybe she'll help." Reluctantly, David agreed. The two boys began walking toward the staff office, their polished shoes crunching against the gravel path. David felt a mixture of nervousness and hope. Maybe this would finally give him some answers, or at least someone to talk to about his frustrations. As they reached the door to the staff office, they slowed down when they heard voices coming from inside. Two female teachers were speaking in hushed tones, their words carrying through the open window. "That boy, David, is just too handsome," one of them said with a soft laugh. Her voice was unmistakably that of Miss Efi, a youth corps member who was teaching in the school for the year. "I wish he were older. If he were, I would have loved to date or even marry him." Peter's eyes widened and he turned to David, who stood frozen in place. They exchanged a look of shock before turning their attention back to the conversation inside. The other teacher, whose voice David recognized as Mrs. Daniels, let out a sigh. "It's not just that, Ife. His beauty is distracting. I can't concentrate in class when I'm teaching him. That's why I always send him out. It's easier for me to focus without him sitting there, looking like some kind of movie star." Miss Ife chuckled. "Poor boy, it's not his fault, you know. He was just born that way." "I know," Mrs. Daniels replied, "but still, it's frustrating. I have to maintain order in my classroom, and with David there, it's impossible." David and Peter stared at each other, their emotions a whirlwind of disbelief, anger, and confusion. David clenched his fists, feeling a wave of helplessness wash over him. His friend reached out and touched his arm gently. "Let's go, David. You don't need to hear any more of this." Without a word, David turned away from the staff office, his head hanging low. Peter followed him as they walked in silence toward the large baobab tree that stood at the edge of the school compound. When they reached the shade of the tree, David sank to the ground and buried his face in his hands. "Oh, Dame," David said, his voice muffled by his hands. "Why does my face cause so much trouble? I didn't ask to look like this. Why did God make me this way if it was only going to be a burden?" Peter sat down beside him, his expression full of concern. "David, it's not your fault. You hurt them, it's their problem, not yours. They're the ones who are being unfair, not you." "But I'm the one who has to suffer for it," David replied, his voice cracking. "I just want to be treated like everyone else. I don't want to stand out so much. I don't want to be punished for something I can't control." Peter hesitated, unsure of how to comfort his friend. He had never seen David so upset before. David was usually calm and composed, even when faced with unfair treatment. But now he was overwhelmed, his emotions pouring out like a dam that had finally burst. As the afternoon wore on, the school bell rang, signaling the end of the day. David and Peter got up and began walking home together, the events of the day still fresh in their minds. Peter, ever the problem solver, couldn't shake off what they'd overheard at the staff office. He turned to his friend, determined to cheer him up. "David," Peter started, placing a hand on his shoulder, "I've been thinking about this whole thing, and I think you've been looking at it the wrong way." David sighed, his brows furrowed. "What do you mean, Peter?" "I mean, you're always upset about how people treat you because of your looks, but what if you used it to your advantage? Instead of feeling like a burden, why don't you find a way to make them like you even more?" David frowned. "Use it to my advantage? How, Peter? These teachers don't even want me in their classrooms." Peter grinned. "That's where you're wrong, my friend. From what we heard today, some of those teachers don't hate you, they're just overwhelmed by how handsome you are. They don't know how to handle it, but you can turn that around. What if you started being extra nice to one of them, like Miss Mary? She's a youth corper, and she already likes you," Peter said, his excitement growing. David tilted his head, considering the idea. "Miss Mary? She's the one who said she'd date me if I were older." "Exactly," Peter said, his excitement growing. "She already has a soft spot for you. If you get closer to her, maybe she'll start defending you in front of the other teachers. She might even help you get back into Mrs. Daniels' good books." David hesitated. He wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea of using his looks to gain favor, but Peter's suggestion made sense. It was better than feeling helpless. "All right, Peter, I'll give it a try. But how do I get close to her without it looking suspicious?" Peter's grin widened. "Simple. Start small, offer to help her with little things, carry her books, get her snacks, stuff like that. Teachers love helpful students. Trust me, she'll warm up to you in no time." The next day, David decided to put Peter's plan into action. After their last class of the day, he noticed Miss Mary gathering her things. Summoning his courage, he approached her. "Good afternoon, Ma," David said politely. "Do you need any help with your books? I can take them to the staff office for you." Miss Mary looked up, surprised. A smile spread across her face. "Oh, thank you, David. That's very kind of you." David picked up the books and walked alongside her to the staff office. As they walked, Miss Mary began to ask him questions about his day and his interests. She seemed genuinely interested in getting to know him, and David found himself relaxing in her presence. Over the next few days, David made it a habit to help Miss Mary with small tasks. He would fetch her water or snacks from the canteen, carry her lesson notes to and from the classroom, and even clean the chalkboard before her lessons. Miss Mary seemed to appreciate his efforts, and their conversations became more frequent and personal. One day, during a free period, Miss Mary called David to her desk in the staff office. "David," she said, her tone warm, "you've been so helpful lately. I really appreciate it. But tell me, why are you going out of your way to help me?" David hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "Well, Ma, I just wanted to make things easier for you. You're always so busy, and I like helping out." Miss Mary smiled. "That's very sweet of you, David, but I hope you're not doing this because you think you're in trouble with the other teachers. You're a good boy, and it's not your fault if some people don't know how to handle your uniqueness." As weeks went by, David and Miss Mary grew closer. She often sought him out for small errands and even asked for his opinions on her lesson plans. Their bond didn't go unnoticed by the other teachers, especially Mrs. Daniels, who had always been critical of David. One afternoon, during a staff meeting, Mrs. Daniels made an offhand comment to Miss Mary. "You've been spending a lot of time with that David boy lately. Don't you think it's inappropriate to get so close to a student?" Miss Mary, unbothered, replied calmly, "David is a respectful and helpful boy. He's just being kind and I appreciate it. Maybe if you got to know him better, you'd see that too." Mrs. Daniels frowned, clearly displeased. The idea of Miss Mary defending David didn't sit well with her. In the following days, she started noticing how much time David spent around Miss Mary. The two seemed to share an easy camaraderie, and it bothered her more than she cared to admit. It wasn't long before Mrs. Daniels began to act differently toward David. She stopped sending him out of the classroom and even tried to engage him during lessons. The change confused David, but Peter quickly pointed out the obvious. "She's jealous, David. You're winning them over without even realizing it." David shook his head, finding the situation both amusing and strange. He had never intended to create competition among the teachers, but it seemed to be happening on its own. David's confidence began to grow. He realized that Peter had been right all along. Looks weren't a burden, they were a gift. Peter noticed how they smiled at him, engaged him in light-hearted conversations, and how David was often called upon for special errands. "David," Peter started, breaking the silence, "you've really turned the tables with these teachers, but listen, I've been thinking. You can push this even further." David raised an eyebrow, curious. "How do you mean, Peter? Push it further how?" Peter leaned in, speaking in a hushed tone. "If you're smart about it, you can use your closeness with these teachers to secure better grades. You know how competitive our class is, right? Imagine if you start coming first in every test and exam. They like you so much now. They'll probably make it easier for you." David hesitated, unsure. "But Peter, isn't that, I don't know, wrong?" Peter shrugged. "Look, I'm not saying you should cheat. I'm saying that if they already like you, they'll naturally want to help you succeed. Think about it. Don't you deserve a little help after everything you've gone through with them?" David nodded slowly, the idea sinking in. "I guess you're right. It's not like I'm doing anything bad. I'll just keep being nice to them and see where it leads." From that moment, David doubled down on his efforts to stay close to the teachers. He continued helping Miss Mary with her errands, and he even began assisting Mrs. Daniels and Mrs. Grace. The teachers in turn grew even fonder of him, often praising him in front of the class. But his growing confidence also started to change the dynamics of his friendship with Peter. A few weeks later, the class test results were announced. Miss Mary walked into the classroom, holding a stack of marked papers. She smiled as she addressed the class. "Good afternoon, everyone. I have your test results here, and I must say I'm very impressed with how some of you performed. Now, for the top 3 positions," she paused for dramatic effect. "In 3rd place, we have Sarah with 78%, in 2nd place, Peter with 84%, and in 1st place, David with an outstanding 92%. The class erupted into applause. But Peter sat frozen in his seat, his face clouded with disbelief. He had always come first in class, and this was the first time anyone had beaten him. He glanced at David, who was smiling shyly as the class congratulated him. Peter felt a surge of anger and jealousy. After class, Peter walked home alone, replaying the events in his mind. How could David have overtaken him? He had been the one to suggest that David get closer to the teachers, but now it felt like his advice had backfired. He remembered how Miss Mary always gave David extra attention and began to suspect that favoritism was at play. David must have gotten those grades because of his closeness to Miss Mary, Peter muttered to himself. It's not fair. This was supposed to help him, not take my place. Peter's resentment grew with each passing day. He started to distance himself from David, avoiding their usual hangouts under the baobab tree. David noticed the change in his friend's behavior and tried to talk to him, but Peter always brushed him off with vague excuses. One afternoon, as Peter sat alone, he decided he couldn't keep his frustrations to himself any longer. He resolved to expose what he believed was an unfair advantage. The next morning, Peter marched to the principal's office. Principal Ade, a stern but fair man, looked up from his desk as Peter entered. "Yes, Peter, what brings you here?" Principal Ade asked, adjusting his glasses. Peter hesitated for a moment, but then decided to speak his mind. "Sir, I have something important to tell you. It's about David and some of the teachers in our school." The principal frowned. "Go on." Peter took a deep breath. David has been getting very close to the female teachers, especially Miss Mary. I think that's why he's been getting such high grades recently. It's not fair to the rest of us. Principal Ade leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Are you saying that the teachers are favoring David because of his relationship with them?" "Yes, sir," Peter replied. "I even overheard some of them talking about how handsome he is. They like him too much, and it's affecting their judgment." Principal Ade nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Peter. I will look into it." The Principal Ade called Corper Mary into his office after the meeting with the other teachers. His stern expression made it clear that this was not going to be a pleasant conversation. Corper Mary, though visibly nervous, tried to maintain her composure. She sat down in the chair opposite him, clutching her notebook tightly. "Miss Mary," Principal Ade began, folding his hands on his desk. "I've received reports that you've been unusually close to a student, David. This has raised serious concerns among your colleagues and the school administration. I need you to explain yourself." Corper Mary took a deep breath. "Sir, it's true that I've been close to David, but it's not what people are making it out to be. David is a bright boy, and he's been struggling with his classwork. I decided to help him after school because he showed interest in improving his grades. That's all there is to it." The principal frowned, his tone growing sharper. "Helping a student is one thing, Miss Mary, but several teachers have reported that your relationship with David seems inappropriate. They say you've been spending too much time with him, and this has caused unnecessary distractions in the school." "Sir, those teachers are simply jealous of my approach to teaching," Corporal Mary replied, her voice rising slightly. "David has been respectful and hard-working, and I've only been guiding him academically. There's nothing improper about our relationship." Principal Ade didn't appear convinced. He picked up a folder from his desk and flipped through its contents. "Miss Mary, I have testimonies from 3 teachers, Mrs. Daniels, Mrs. Grace, and Mrs. O'Con, all of whom have stated that your closeness to David is unprofessional and that it is affecting the dynamics in the classroom. Are you saying all of them are wrong?" Corper Mary hesitated. She knew the teachers were jealous of her bond with David, especially after he began excelling academically, but she also knew that arguing against their collective testimony would only worsen the situation. "Sir, I believe their testimonies are influenced by personal feelings rather than facts," she said carefully. Principal Ade leaned back in his chair, clearly unimpressed. "I cannot ignore the weight of these allegations, Miss Mary. Whether or not your intentions were pure, your actions have created an environment of discomfort and suspicion. This is a secondary school, not a place for such controversies. I'll have to take action." Before Corporal Mary could respond, Principal Aid dismissed her from his office, leaving her feeling helpless and frustrated. David, meanwhile, was hurt by the betrayal. He confronted Peter after school, his voice trembling with emotion. "Peter, why did you do this? I thought we were friends." Peter avoided his gaze. "I'm sorry, David, but I couldn't keep quiet. It felt like you were getting an unfair advantage. I didn't like losing to you." David looked at him sadly. "Friendship isn't a competition, Peter. I hope you realize that before it's too late." The tension between them lingered, leaving both boys to question the true meaning of friendship and fairness. The next day, the principal called an emergency assembly. The entire school gathered in the large hall, murmuring among themselves about what the meeting could be about. David stood among his classmates, his heart pounding with anxiety. Principal Aid stepped onto the stage, his expression grave. "Students and staff," he began, his voice echoing through the hall. "It has come to my attention that inappropriate relationships and favoritism have disrupted the integrity of our academic environment. After a thorough investigation, I have made a difficult decision regarding one of our students, David." The murmurs in the hall grew louder. David's classmates turned to look at him, their faces a mixture of shock and curiosity. "Effective immediately," Principal Aid continued. "David is expelled from this school. His actions, along with the involvement of Corporal Mary, have compromised the values we uphold as an institution. This decision is final." Gasps filled the room. David felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under him. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Expelled? For what? David turned back to look at Peter with a long, deep stare. He thought about the best revenge for Peter. If you were in David's shoes, what would you do?